Hello everyone, my name is Harrison Faulkner. You are watching the very first episode of True North's newest show, Ratioed. The point of this show is to go over and analyze the very worst of the week in social media. Yes, we're going to be getting into the weirdest, wildest, and unfortunately for all of us, the cringiest posts of the week so that we can bring a new element to our coverage at True North to analyze really the new cultural battleground that is becoming the social media platforms. For those of you that don't know me, my name is Harrison Faulkner. I've been on the Candace Malcolm show. Usually you'll see me on Fake News Friday. I've also done some reporting. But for those of you that don't know me, I'm based in Toronto, and I'm a producer and reporter here at True North. Now, the success of Ratioed will depend on you, the audience member, because as we all know, there's just simply far too much cringe content out there on social media for us to cover in 1 week. We simply couldn't do it, folks. So we're asking you to help us tailor the show to what you guys want to see. If you see something on social media, if you see something on TikTok, send it to us. Send it to our social media inboxes. We are monitoring all those at True North because, of course, if we were just to look at the CBC alone, we'd have far too much content. So we want to try and tailor it down and make it a fun show, an engaging show for you guys. But, of course, there's a show we have to do today, and we have plenty of content to get into. Let's get into our first horrible take. This comes from Catherine McKenna, Trudeau's former environment minister. Now, just for some context, last week, the Ontario provincial election went Doug Ford's way. He won a resounding majority government, beating Stephen Del Duca, the Liberal leader, and Andrea Horwath, the NDP, to extend his majority government. And that frankly surprised nobody. The media was not enthusiastic, didn't cover it with a lot of passion, and of course voter turnout and enthusiasm was quite low. But that didn't stop Catherine McKenna from giving us one of her typical horrible takes on Twitter. And this one she wrote after the election saying, "Mandatory voting, an idea whose time has come, an obligation of citizenship, requiring parties to appeal to broader public rather than just a small base. How liberal, Catherine. What a great idea, forcing us to vote. I'm sure you'd be saying the exact same thing if Stephen Del Duca won, right?" Well, likely not, guys. And of course, as you can imagine, most of the public response led to the same question. What would be the punishment for not voting if you make it mandatory? Would the Liberals bring out the tear gas or the horses? I sure hope not, but you never really know, right? You never know because this is part of the democracy. It's also important to note, though, that in Ontario, voters do have the ability and the right to spoil their ballot at the ballot box. So you do have that option in Ontario, which is not the case across the country and in different municipalities. But when Catherine McKenna says this, you don't really think she's just talking about Ontario, right? This is across the board. This is federally when she talks about this sort of thing. And let's just get into some of the responses on Twitter to this ridiculous take. So first off, we have True North's Rupa Subramanya saying, highly illiberal. Having the right to opt out and not vote is part of democracy. You can't put a gun to people's head and force them to vote. Suppose they don't like any of the choices on offer. Suppose they just don't want to vote. Great question. Exactly. This is what this is. Forcing someone to vote is the opposite of liberal, Catherine McKenna. But of course, you probably don't need to know that. One person comes in with the perfect response to this, which is mandatory, non-partisan mental fitness tests for all government employees should have been in place long ago. Ryan, great idea. And here's another person who comes in with a great response. Why do all liberals want to force people to do things all of a sudden? WTF happened to this party in the last 10 years? Seriously. Well, great question. Why are they pushing these illiberal policies when things don't go their way? Is it because they actually are not grounded in liberalism at all? Well, maybe that is the case. Okay, so sticking with the Ontario provincial election, and just a quick side note before we go any further. For years, I have avoided having to download TikTok. Really out of principle, I prefer not to use social media apps run by the Communist Party of China and give them my data. But nonetheless, because of this show, I have broken my TikTok fast, so please, I am expecting some appreciation from the audience because of that, but I've immediately paid the price, guys. After about 5 minutes of searching through that app, I have been faced with some absolutely horrendous takes. I've had to watch lots of purple-haired people tell me their political opinions on the issues of the day. It has not endorsed TikTok at all. It has not made me want to stay on that app, but I will do it for you. I will do it for the show to go through that app. And of course, it didn't take very long for me to stumble upon a horrible take on the provincial election from somebody with purple hair. This person, he calls himself Crazy Gay Uncle. That's not what we call him, but without a name, I guess we'll have to call him that for the time being. So this is Crazy Gay Uncle. This is what he has to say about Doug Ford's victory in the provincial election.
I don't want to hear anybody who voted for Doug Ford start complaining about price increases, privatized healthcare, and just shit quality living. You voted for someone who prioritizes the 1% in Ontario. He pulled a buck of beer again on you, and you guys fell for it. Again. The license plate sticker rebate checks are literally bouncing.
Literally.
But yeah, vote him back in, because he's really gonna do something for us. And I don't want to hear it from you guys. You did this.
Now, I think the main argument he's trying to make here is that Ontarians can't complain about the cost of living because Doug Ford is the Premier of Ontario. I think our friend Crazy Gay Uncle might be missing the fact that inflation across the country is at a 31-year high. That is the sole responsibility of the Bank of Canada and the federal government led by Justin Trudeau, not the Premier of Ontario. Inflation being at a record high affects Canadians across the board, across every single province. Now, even closer, let's look at the price of food from 2019 alone, from the beginning of 2019 to today. Look at that price increase. That is affecting every single person in the country, not just the province of Ontario. So I guess the line is that you're unable to criticize cost of living issues like the sky-high price of gas, or the fact that our money no longer goes as far as it once did because Ontario voted for a government that is trying to be fiscally responsible. I'm no fan of the PCs right now, but that being said, they are far more concerned about being fiscally responsible than the other option on the table. Okay, moving on to the next story. We turn our attention to the CBC, which is quite exciting. We're doing it for the very first time. Certainly won't be the last. And we appreciate what the CBC does. They give us so much content to laugh at, so much content to make fun of, and really just to have a good chuckle about. But I think this next video we might have a little trouble laughing at because it's really just not that funny. And I'll invite you to try and join me in this challenge. I want to see if we can laugh at this comedy sketch. Now, for those of you that don't know, June is, of course, Pride Month. We all knew that because everywhere you look on social media, it's being forced on us. Every single corporation, every leftist politician, they want to virtue signal their support for the Pride community. But for those of you that don't know, June is also the National Indigenous History Month. Now, if you were to ask me, I think that's a cultural conflict. You can't have the Indigenous population and the Pride community, whatever we want to call them, sharing the same month. Surely one of them needs their own month. But for the time being, they have to share June. And the CBC is actually doing their best to highlight some Indigenous voices. And they are using TikTok to put forward some CBC comedy. This is some taxpayer-funded comedy, stand-up. I think the idea is that we're supposed to laugh, guys, but I don't know. Let's see. Let's see if we find this clip funny. So this is a clip from a woman named Janelle Niles. She is an Indigenous comedian. And guys, this is what state-sponsored stand-up looks like. Let's see if we can laugh.
My name is Janelle Niles, and I'm a First Nations Mi'kmaq woman from Sipikanakadik, Nova Scotia. And my spirit name is First Rays of the Sun Woman. But my parents like to call me, hey, go back to bed. But First Rays of the Sun Woman, that's a long spirit name, eh? Normally you would get like Fish Boy or Bear With Me.
Okay, just stop. What's with that chuckle in the background? It's not that funny. Is that a state-sponsored laugh as well?
But I think the Creator named me that because every morning at the crack of dawn, I go outside and I sing my traditional Indigenous morning song.
That was it. Did we miss the punchline or something? Anyway, that, folks, is state-sponsored comedy. I don't know where the joke was there. Clearly I missed it. Let me know if you found it. But I certainly wasn't howling and chuckling like that woman was in the background. Now, of course, the show is called Ratioed, and our show wouldn't be complete if we didn't at least highlight one serious ratio of the week, if we didn't point our fingers at someone who took a huge L on social media, and it's my absolute privilege to announce the inaugural winner of the Ratio of the Week award to the CBC, of course. CBC Montreal, with their 180,000 followers on Twitter, could only muster a grand total of 15 likes on a tweet in which they interview Richard Wagner, better known as Dick Wagner, the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court of Canada, in which he basically warns Canadians to avoid scrutinizing his court for fear of it becoming political. So, if you're a Canadian, you disagree with what the judiciary does, don't criticize it, because if you do, that might erode the political independence, the independence of the judiciary. Ironically, the CBC decided that you weren't allowed to comment on this tweet. You're not allowed to comment on the tweet that you funded with your taxpayer money. Because of course you're not. We've seen the CBC do this. Anytime they may make a video that's slightly controversial on YouTube, no comments. Anytime they put out an article which will almost certainly result in lots of criticism from the public, and rightly so with this article, they don't allow you to comment, because that'd be the worst thing for them to hear, is your dissatisfaction with their journalism. So we're going to highlight them on this show instead. And we're going to go through some of the best quote tweets, some of the best responses to this absurd CBC article. So here we have Truck Driving Pleb. Great name, by the way. You know it's propaganda when they turn off the comments, right? When they don't want you to respond, when they don't want to see your frustration, they just won't allow you to respond. It's quite simple. One other person writes, CBC is limiting who can reply to this outrageous article where Canada's top judge warns Canadians. Here, Real Chris Coe writes, what kind of supposed public broadcaster shuts down commentary on its own tweets? So there it is, folks. Give a round of applause to CBC Montreal for being the very first winners of the Ratio of the Week award. Couldn't have happened to a better group of reporters, in my opinion, right? And finally, to wrap up the show this week, I found a rather disturbing TikTok video by the Marxist fight back group, the Socialists in Canada. They were protesting at Queen's Park, the Ontario legislature, a few weeks ago, of course, on abortion. In Canada, there are no laws against abortion, yet that doesn't stop the radical left from demanding, I guess you could say, more access to abortion in this country. Well, without trying to summarize what this woman is trying to say, why don't I just let her say it herself?
One of the biggest reasons for having abortions is financial reasons. And I have to say, if the only reason someone is having an abortion, but they want the pregnancy, that is also an indictment of capitalism.
I don't think there are many women who want to keep their baby, but instead kill it because of financial reasons. If you want to keep your baby, I don't think you're going to kill it because you don't have the money. And of course, it's an indictment on capitalism. Of course it is. If only we were servants to the state and all poor. I'm sure that'd be far better.
Shame. You have Indigenous women who give birth and then are sterilized without their consent.
Is there a source for that?
Reproductive rights as well. Yeah, so what we need a system that's run in our interests, in the interests of the working class. We need to put the resources of our society to use to build a system where healthcare, every kind of healthcare, is widely available. Where there's social supports for women and people in abusive relationships, where there's free childcare, and where there's good sex ed, where there's available birth control, and there's free abortions on demand.
That means they want to have abortions on your taxpayer money, whenever, however, and at any time they'd like. And that's why we're doing this show. We're going to expose the absolute worst takes, the funniest takes, some things that are really tough to laugh at, like that horrible state-funded comedy, and of course, the downright disturbing. But that's what the whole point is. Social media is the new cultural battlefield, and True North wants to make sure that our audience is able to figure out what's going on in that platform. So if you see something on social media, send it to us. We're monitoring our inboxes. We will pick it up. Thank you very much for tuning in. My name is Harrison Faulkner, and this was the very first episode of Ratioed.